Joining us now, we have the Executive Director of Employ America, Skanda Amarnath. Great to have you, Skanda. Welcome.
Good to see you, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, our pleasure. So you took a look at the debt ceiling debacle from a different lens than what I had seen anyone else take, talking about the role that Treasury could and should be playing here. Just talk to us a little bit about why you chose to focus on them.
Right. So it seems as if Treasury has a pretty central role in shaping the negotiations for the White House. It seems like Secretary Yellen plays a pretty big role in this, but not just her. There are other people within Treasury. There are a couple of other people outside of Treasury too. But I would say because ultimately it's about paying U.S. debts, Treasury is inherently going to be central to all of this. And the Treasury itself seems to be thinking that by writing off all alternatives, they are somehow strengthening their negotiating position, which is to the antithesis of any kind of logic or rationality about negotiation. You try to keep your options open to the best of your ability. And we've just seen the complete opposite from Treasury so far, which is just baffling to me.
So, yeah, can you explain a little bit about what you laid out there? Our audience, they are going to know what the debt ceiling is, but debt servicing, the level of Treasury, what some of the missed opportunities that, in your opinion, have been, lay that out for everybody.
Sure. So obviously they're trying to, Biden has talked about this, Yellen has talked about this, that it'd be great if Congress, we should have Congress raise the debt ceiling like it always has and do it cleanly, because that's the way it should be done, because you shouldn't be bargaining over the full faith and credit of the United States, which I think is actually right. But the Treasury is not without options if Congress doesn't do that. Treasury has methods by which it can actually make sure the debt ceiling isn't an issue for making sure we pay our debts on time and that we don't have a default that's super dislocating, or this notion of, well, we could pay the bondholders, but then we can just make cuts elsewhere, payment prioritization. All of these things are deeply complicated, constitutionally very questionable, when in fact they could pursue fully lawful solutions if they actually were willing to say, okay, ideally Congress can raise the debt ceiling, but if they don't do it, we will take matters into our own hands. And there are powers other than invoking the 14th Amendment per se, which I'm still not sure what that means, that would add up to taking control of negotiations and not letting yourself be held hostage in the manner that they basically have. They basically have let Republicans control the show by saying, oh, we're not going to pursue any alternatives to you raising the debt ceiling, and therefore the price of raising the debt ceiling keeps going up.
I think it was Matt Brunig who laid all of this out in a way that made sense to me, which is okay, let's say that Biden did absolutely nothing, right? There's no deal, there's no debt ceiling increase. He now has a conflicting set of instructions that he's received from the United States Congress. That would almost inherently have to go through a legal process to resolve. None of the options is particularly palatable. One is the sort of 14th Amendment route where you're no, you said we're going to spend this money and the debt shouldn't be called into question. So we're going to take on the debt. We're going to do what we need to do. And that's, what the Constitution instructs us to do. Another one would be to do what I think Republicans have more floated, which is all right, well, you prioritize payments and maybe the bondholders get paid, but the veterans don't or whatever. But then that represents the executive taking on effectively the power of the purse, which is another constitutionally bad option. So you're left with all of these, problematic issues if Biden doesn't act whatsoever. And thinking of that in that regard helped me to understand sort of the crux of this issue, that really you do kind of need some sort of legal judgment about these conflicting sets of instructions and the bizarre setup we have where you got one vote to spend the money and another one to do what it takes to actually make sure you fulfill your obligations.
That's right. And so if you have, I thought Matt Brunig's column was excellent and kind of speaks to the separation of powers problems that emerge. And so there is this sort of legal conflict that has to be resolved. And it'd be one thing if there was no solution to this problem, if you're Treasury, oh, we have to get the debt ceiling up. But there are solutions available if they are willing to put their minds to it. And what has become very abundantly clear is they're not trying to put their minds to it.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's pretty unwise to do that if you want the debt ceiling to be increased. The worst thing you can say is, well, oh, I have no alternative except to just concede to everything that you possibly would want. And that is exactly the road they've chose to go down. And I think that
Hmm.
is ultimately to the detriment of U.S. default risk, to the detriment of actually paying our debts on time, and makes the debt ceiling is not this kind of big sweepstakes issue that it always tends to be.
Can you talk about, so we've talked about the 14th Amendment here. We've talked about the, hashtag mint the coin.
Yeah.
But the other one, which we've referenced but haven't really totally laid out, frankly, because I don't 100% understand it, is the idea of Treasury issuing callable perpetual bonds. You lay out, the technicalities of this in your column. Can you just explain as best you can in layman terms what this looks like and what it means?
So if you read the debt ceiling statute, the law itself, it's pretty short, and it's quoted in terms of the face amount of the obligations. The face amount is for a bond for which there is a principal repayment.
Okay.
So obviously, you pay back interest and principal most of the time with bonds. But there are bonds that exist where only the interest is guaranteed and there is no guaranteed principal. That would be a perpetuity, effectively. So you would have regular interest payments, and at some point, the government may or may not decide, I have the right to pay back, to buy back this perpetuity from the bondholder. But it's my right/option, but I don't have to do it. And we did this for financing something like the Panama Canal. These things existed from 1900 to 1930. So there's precedent for this. A perpetual bond is a real thing. You can look it up on Investopedia. These things are not just purely for the sake of evading the debt ceiling. They're real instruments. I think that does matter for sort of how people perceive the viability, that passes the laugh test. I think obviously the coin, by the way, I'm pro coin in the sense that I think it's legal. And so if it's legal, go for it. But this is probably going to win over more people, I suspect, within the White House. But it's the kind of thing that they should be exploring in the here and now. They should have been exploring this 5 months ago.
Yeah.
And they've just written a lot of these ideas off the table. There are some other ideas also that can work in terms of making sure that we don't default on our debts and we're not using the debt ceiling as this big ransom note of sorts. But the perpetual bond idea is one that has a lot of precedent rooted in it. So the government has done this. And if you guarantee interest without guaranteeing principal, it's quite clear that one, the government has the power to issue these instruments, and two, that it doesn't count towards the debt ceiling. So that's two things it has going for it that are kind of unique to the solution.
And why do you think that they've taken these options off the table? Is it just Biden and Yellen are real institutionalists? They don't want to engage in these novel arguments? What is their thinking behind the scenes?
I think there's a lot of sort of abiding by sort of prior norms, not wanting to exert too much creativity. There's a fear of the unknown in terms of it being, because it's novel and you're deviating from precedent, then you are therefore doing something that is going to be a political liability. So it's if we say, for example, the coin example people bring up, it's if we say we're going to do the coin, Republicans are going to have a field day with this. They're going to mock us. They're going to say that we're doing something reckless. And obviously it's not kind of unprovable until you actually go down that road. But I do think it should be at least clear there are other options on the table. And I think it's actually to the benefit of some people to say, oh, well, if the only option is the coin, that seems worse. But then it's there are other options too, like perpetual bonds. There are other things they could be doing in terms of Fed Treasury coordination if they really wanted to put the screws on the negotiation to make sure we are. In some ways, the best way to get to a clean debt ceiling increase, you have to be open to other options. Otherwise, if you are not open to other options, you're not going to get a clean debt ceiling increase. You're going to get something that's pretty dirty. And that's exactly the road we're on right now.
I think that's a good point, because the thing that Republicans have going for them is they have people in the caucus that you feel are genuinely crazy enough to push the country over the cliff. And so you have to have people on the other side who seem at least crazy enough to mint the coin, to have some sort of semblance of leverage in the negotiations.
That's right. And I guess the point I'd make is that even if you think the coin is somehow beyond the pale, and again, as I said, I have nothing bad to say about the coin idea specifically, but there are other options on the table if you're willing to look for them. And what's been obvious the last few weeks is that the Treasury has not done the homework to actually look through all these options. If they did, and they're hiding in the background, great. But I don't see that.
You don't see any evidence of that
publicly.
Thank you so much for breaking all of this down for me. I think I understand the bond option a lot better now, so I appreciate that. And it's always great to see you.
Appreciate it.
Great, thanks.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.